Our State of the U.S. segment tonight, Democrats have successfully delayed the confirmation vote for President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Neil Gorsuch. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer promised to obstruct Gorsuch's confirmation process in any way possible. But even if Democrats do filibuster Gorsuch, he could still be confirmed with 51 votes if Republicans choose to use the nuclear option. With me now from the Washington Times, attorney Alex Swoyer. Alex, good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me.
All right, Alex, from where I sit, this is how I see this situation that's going on in the Senate, this argument between Republicans and Democrats about whether filibuster is going to happen, whether it's not, and if it does, whether the nuclear option will be used. I see Senator Schumer here as being hypocritical. I see him as being an obstructionist who, regardless of the qualifications of Judge Gorsuch, just doesn't want him to pass, doesn't want him to be appointed because he doesn't like President Trump.
Yeah, and that's what Republicans on the Hill are saying. You know, there's a lot of Democrats that are using the excuse that Judge Gorsuch was evasive during his questioning, but he again just cited the Ginsburg rule, which is, you know, when she came up for her confirmation hearing, she said, I'm not able to give my opinion on an issue that might be coming before me as a judge, and that's kind of what he followed, and he was very careful, especially when Senator Leahy was trying to grill him on how he would rule in terms of a religious ban on travelers coming to America, obviously getting at President Trump's executive vetting order. So, you know, I don't know if that's a fair target. They have looked at other cases he's ruled on and been critical of that. That might be more fair to criticize, but the way he answered questions, I thought he did really well.
Right, he seemed to me, and I know that I agree with him ideologically, or so I assume based off of his rulings, but he seemed to me to be a man of character, someone who is really endeavoring to apply the Constitution as it's written, not someone who's trying to be an activist from the bench. But Alex, look at this historically for me for a moment. You're the expert on this. Is this atypical? How he answered, deferring from answering hypothetical questions, not answering on cases that are open. Historically, I mean, even narrow it down to the last 10, 12 years, the last 2 or 3 administrations, is this typically how judges who have been nominated for the Supreme Court have answered?
Yes, absolutely. You're right. And it's nothing different, especially the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has actually said the gold standard for Supreme Court nominees is to have the well-qualified, highly qualified approval rating from the American Bar Association. That is what they did give Judge Gorsuch. So, I mean, it is at a point where you have now the majority leader, the second-ranking Republican, Senator John Cornyn, coming out and pointing to that, pointing specifically to the ABA rating, saying this is exactly the gold standard that the Democrats had laid out previously for Supreme Court nominees, and now they're walking that back just because this is a nominee from President Trump.
Right. I mean, I don't know what their excuse is at this point. He answered well. The American Bar Association has endorsed him. He's been unanimously confirmed in the Senate before by these same people, actually. Who's going to take part in this?
Yes.
Who's going to take part in this filibuster if it does happen? We know that Chuck Schumer said that he will. We know that Senator Durbin said he would as well. But there are a couple of Democrats who are still holding out.
You're right, and there's exactly 6 Democrats that are key to watch. They come from states that were won by President Trump, and Senator Michael Bennet, who's from Colorado, it's Judge Gorsuch's home state, who introduced him actually at his confirmation hearing. So all of those Democrats are facing a lot of pressure. There's been conservative groups that have put ads out in their home states, pressuring them to back Judge Gorsuch, especially because they're up for re-election, many of them. So they're having to face a choice between following their leader, Senator Schumer's pressure to filibuster, or following what their constituents wanted when they voted for President Trump.
Right, and there's also a difference, and I think it's worth noting here that there's a difference between partaking in a filibuster or just when the vote is actually brought to the floor. If there's not a filibuster, choosing to vote against Judge Gorsuch. The Democrats still have the option of doing that if they feel he's unqualified without partaking in a filibuster.
And what you just hit on is kind of what Senator Leahy suggested over the weekend. On Sunday, he was doing an interview and he said, you know, I'm not inclined to support Judge Gorsuch on the final vote, but I'm not inclined to filibuster. So what that exactly means is the Senate will vote to end debate, and that's what a filibuster is. They have to reach 60 votes. And so that's where Judge Gorsuch really needs 8 votes from outside the Republican Party, because there's only 52 Republicans in the Senate right now. And so if he can get past that 60 votes, then he goes to a final vote passage, which would just be the majority vote. So it's really, voting to end debate, and that's what he's looking at. And if Senator Leahy's kind of taking a different position than Senator Schumer, although we saw him send out a few tweets Monday trying to walk that back, it looks like there is an opportunity for Judge Gorsuch to recruit, 7 to 8 Democrats that might join in. We do know Senator Manchin has said he will not filibuster.
Right, so that's 2 right there. They just need a couple more. And like I said, I truly don't know what excuse that they can offer, what valid excuse besides just politics, besides their dislike of Trump at this point. Alex, let me touch on something you just said. This is pretty interesting, too. If we're looking at the historical aspect here, because, by the way, this is what Democrats are citing when they're citing their behavior. They're saying that Gorsuch is an illegitimate nominee because of the way Republicans treated Merrick Garland, the fact that Republicans wouldn't even bring him to the floor for debate. They just refused altogether here. But if we're looking at the history of the thing, how many Supreme Court nominees have been in a situation where they've either required 60 votes to be confirmed or got to 60 votes?
If I'm accurate in my historical take, I believe it was only one ever that did not go through the normal process, where it was the last year and a president who was outgoing wasn't able to pick his Supreme Court nominee. So, this isn't out of lockstep. Some of the Republicans on the Hill have been saying if this role was reversed, you can bet Democrats would be doing the same thing. And this whole threat to go nuclear and change the filibuster rule was actually mentioned during the campaign by Democrats in terms of if Hillary Clinton was to nominate a Supreme Court justice, and if they had the majority, they would do the same thing. In fact, to talk about history, they actually did this. They went nuclear in 2013 when they held the majority in the Senate for President Obama's nominees, and they just left it in place for the Supreme Court. So, they've done it before. If it was reversed, it's likely they would be doing it. So it's just the question of whether or not Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will, in fact, go nuclear if he has to. And then he has to decide if he has that 51 votes to do it. He has 52 Republicans, so he can't really lose anyone there.
Right. So the precedent, what you're saying is the precedent has been set, but the tipping point, I try never to overlook an opportunity to say that on the show, but the tipping point is that no one's ever used the nuclear option when it comes to a Supreme Court justice or a nominee for the Supreme Court. So that would be new. And again, Alex, just to circle it around to where we began here, it seems to me that Democrats fundamentally dislike Trump. They want to be obstructionists, but they also just fundamentally differ in what they believe, what role they believe the Constitution should play in our Supreme Court. They believe it's a living document, that it should be interpreted through the individual justice's life experience versus someone like Gorsuch who believes in the text as it was written, as it was intended by our founding fathers. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I, for one, hope they don't filibuster. I hope they just, if their conscience dictates it, vote against Gorsuch on the floor, but don't take it into the nuclear option. Alex, thanks for being on the show today.